The House Local Government Municipal Finance Committee will come to order. We are still waiting for a few members to arrive, both in person and virtually. Just to give them a few minutes, we will stand at ease for just a few moments here. I don't know if that required a gavel or not. Local Government Municipal Finance Committee will return to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fitzgerald.
Here.
Representatives Burns.
Here.
Shannon.
Present.
Breen.
Present.
Rogers.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Pies. Zorn. Paquette.
Here.
Bizat. Harris.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We need a motion to approve and adopt the minutes from the February 1st meeting of the committee. Rep. Shannon moves to adopt the minutes of the Local House Government and Municipal Finance Committee from the February 1st meeting. Without objection, the minutes are adopted. At this point, I'd just like to thank everybody for their attendance today and for their attendance last week as well, as we heard testimony from another one of our stakeholder organizations, and today we'll continue that and hear from two more organizations interested in local government, and I look forward to their testimony today, beginning with Dina Bosworth from the Michigan Association of Counties to provide a presentation on her organization. Thank you very much.
Technology first. I like this. Great, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and I'm sorry, unfortunately, missing some of the budget presentation today, but I am Dina Bosworth. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Michigan Association of Counties. I've been there approximately, 12 years. 12 years I've been there advocating on behalf of county government. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to run through a little bit about the Michigan Association of Counties and then talk about really what our priorities are for this legislative term. Some things that we've been working on for several legislative sessions and some things that have come up recently that we'd like to get taken care of. So with that, see, somebody should not Let me have the technology in front of me. So the Michigan Association of Counties represents all 83 counties in the state of Michigan. And we have a board that is made up of 16 directors that are elected from different regions across the state, and then a few that are elected at large. And we strive to ensure that we have a diverse representation on our board, as well as on our internal committees to help us with our policy development. Our role at the counties is really to ensure that our county governments have the tools and the resources to provide the services that they're mandated to provide, both statutorily and constitutionally mandated to provide. In addition to that, we also need the tools and the resources to assist in other endeavors that the legislature sees fit, and working with our other local units or other different partners across the state, whether they be multi-county health departments or mental health boards and the like. As also in the association, not only do we advocate in the legislature for those tools and those resources and good policy that helps counties deliver their services, we provide education and then different other financial services to our member counties. And speaking of our member counties, the 83 counties across the state are extremely different. We have some with very large populations, some with small populations, some with, high per capita income, some with low crime rates, some with high crime rates, some very, very rural, some urban. But for the most part, what I want to get across to this body is that county governments, although they vary in size, resources, population, income, all of those things, they are still required to provide the same basic services to our residents. And these are things that most people don't necessarily think of. Now, I see lots of former county and local government people on this committee, so I may be preaching to the choir, but there are still very consistent services that we have to provide across the state. And when you have few resources and still have to provide, an expensive service, or, you might have more resources but a significant population size, scale matters, resources matter. So county boards, we are not, we do not have home rule. County boards do not pass your typical ordinances. We can do ordinances for, internal county functions, but we really don't create our own little set of laws at the county level. We're really there to deliver services on behalf of the state, what we are authorized to do. We are a public policy-making body, but our primary function is a fiduciary responsibility to fund all of the different functions that we're required to provide. So courts, jails, public health, foster care, our countywide elected offices, so your sheriffs, your prosecutors, all of those. And I'll get to that in just a moment. And as far as county budgets go, we try to be very judicious on how those resources are allocated. But over the past several decades, things have gotten difficult, especially in many areas of the state. And I say that because we're primarily dependent on property tax revenue to make up our budgets. Those are unrestricted funds, unless they're special millages, but those are unrestricted funds that we are able to use for whatever services are required, whatever we deem necessary within the county. And so that flexibility is extremely important. But property tax revenues have seen they've kind of been chipped away. We've seen a lot of struggles with relying on property tax revenue, but that does make up the bulk of a county budget. You've had, the housing recession where property values dropped, property taxes dropped, and then recovering that traditional property tax revenue has taken a very long time. We have some that are barely back to 2008 levels in revenue from their property taxes. And then you look at additional exemptions that are granted by, the state, frankly, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Those erode county budgets. We have other, lawsuits that are kind of eroding county budgets and other property tax exemptions that I won't discuss here, but would love the opportunity to bring up with this group in the future. And then we also, we're listening to the executive budget recommendation today, and we heard about revenue sharing. And the governor, again, recommending, good increases in both county and city, village, and township statutory revenue sharing. But we'll talk a little bit about that history in a minute. And that leads into some more of our priorities. In addition to that, at the association, we just want to let you know that we try to work as best we can with our other countywide elected bodies, the sheriffs, the prosecutors, clerks, register of deeds, and the drain commissioners, and really try to pay attention to what their priorities are, because as long as they have the tools and the resources they need to run their departments, that makes it a little bit easier for us to all provide services at the county level. So we come up with our policies by engaging our members in our internal committee process. And we have 6 different internal committees. So we have a Finance and General Government Committee that's going to deal with things like Open Meetings Act, taxes, FOIA, things like that. Environmental and Regulatory Affairs, Transportation and Infrastructure issues, Agriculture, Tourism, and Natural Resources. And then you go on the Health and Human Services side, so child care, foster care, juvenile justice, public safety, sheriff's, jails, courts, that type of thing. And so we have, I'm terrible about this technology. They meet and they put together what we call our platform. So members from across the state participate on these committees and really tell us how we should feel about different policy areas. That's where we get our guiding direction from, and that's when we come to you and say this is what the counties would like to see. Okay. So, to cut to the meat of it, we're here to kind of to talk to you about what our 6 priorities are for this legislative, or at least for this year. Hopefully we get a bunch of them done and we can have new priorities next year. But we want to talk about the Open Meetings Act, revenue sharing, different property tax issues that didn't get completed, and then some court and juvenile justice issues to talk about. So first, and I know you've heard this before from the Municipal League, and you'll probably hear it from the townships as well, we would really like to revisit the Open Meetings Act. Counties hold thousands of public open meetings every single year. So do some of the other countywide electeds on some of their boards. And then you've got city, township. There's a lot of meetings that they hold. Prior to the pandemic, they had the ability to participate in and vote in an open meeting as long as there was a quorum present. And since the pandemic, we then went all virtual, and then once that expired, once that sunsetted, we didn't have the option of participating and voting virtually after that. And, I think that there are extenuating circumstances across the state where someone would like to continue to serve and participate and vote virtually. And we're not saying that it has to be every meeting. We're saying that even, when there's a quorum present and you've got someone who's in the hospital, or there's a major snowstorm and there's a budget that has to get adopted or votes that need to be taken, they would still like to be able to participate. In addition to that, last year we also saw a very good linguistic rewrite of the Open Meetings Act to make it more understandable by the general public and by the legislative bodies. And we would like to see those 2 things incorporated together and move and modernize the Open Meetings Act so everyone understands there's still some remote participation. We are not opposed to, certain guardrails if there need to be guardrails about how many times or the situations where participating remotely may be needed. We're open to talking about that, but we do think that modernizing the act is the right way to go. Revenue sharing, I just mentioned this. The governor made her revenue sharing recommendation this morning, which was very nice to see. She's recommending a 5% increase in her base, a 5% increase one time for county revenue sharing, and then additional monies for public safety. Haven't dug into that one yet, so I'll comment on that later. But what one of our priorities is to create what we call a revenue sharing trust fund. And this revenue sharing trust fund is something that we would like to see pull out a portion of the state sales tax and put it over into an account, which then gets appropriated out by the legislature every year. And I'll tell you why that's important to us. During the recession, I mentioned how housing values fell and how local government budgets fell and how long it took us to recover to where we were at that 2008 level. Well, at the same time, we also had significant cuts in statutory revenue sharing, and counties even went off of it. And then we came back, and it's been a system of sort of piecemeal as we go along. But revenue sharing was created to share in the state's revenue with local units of government. Way back when, we gave up our own taxing authority because it was much more efficient to have the state collect the taxes and then distribute it back out to local units of government. Well, the system of revenue sharing has been twisted and turned, and formulas really haven't been followed in decades. So what we're proposing here is a carve-out. I say sales tax, but it could be another tax revenue, but a carve-out of this sales tax to go into this trust fund, so that percentage of the sales tax, when it rises, then the money in the revenue sharing trust fund will also go up. If we see a decrease in that tax, then that's part of sharing the revenue. If there's a decrease in revenue, then that would be it. But to this point, there is no math that can be done that says revenue sharing is kept up with inflation or kept up with the increase in receipts from the sales tax. So for us, it's an important issue to create stability and reinstate what revenue sharing was initially meant to do. Okay, talked lots about that. Court funding. We are seeking legislation already and have for several sessions in a row to stabilize court funding for the state of Michigan. Counties are responsible for a very large majority of the expenses for our court system across the state. Part of that is an assessment on criminal defendants for some fines and fees. The Supreme Court decided that it was not specifically statutorily authorized for counties to assign fines and fees to these defendants. The legislature acted very quickly and gave us that statutory authorization, but with a sunset, so we could figure out how to properly fund the courts across the state. That sunset has now been extended 3 times and is set to expire in May of 2024. In the interim, the Trial Court Funding Commission went to work and came up with all kinds of recommendations on how to fix the funding for our trial court system. So there are a whole host of bills and lots of interested members that want to move forward on some trial court funding reform. So that remains one of our top priorities this year. Juvenile justice, and I know the governor talked a little bit about this in her budget presentation today. Did not get to hear all of it, but that is, again, one of our priorities. We are facing not only a bed shortage, but a behavioral health, social worker, mental health provider shortage across our state. And, some of these juveniles have nowhere to go. Foster care parents are, we're asking for an increase in funding for foster care parents too, so we have a place to house these children once they come out of the juvenile justice system. But there is a significant need. We've got kids going out of state, across the state, sometimes even staying in emergency rooms until we can figure out what to do with them. So huge shortage across the state. Yeah, I see you shaking your head. Yes, and it's a problem all over the state. So we're hopeful that this gets addressed this year, and I do think that it was part of the governor's presentation this morning. Back to taxes, which is probably going to be a little bit more in your purview in this committee. Veterans property tax exemption and then personal property tax exemption. I had mentioned earlier how we face struggles with loss of property tax revenue. Well, veterans property taxes is one of those things that has been a large hit on local budgets, not just counties, all levels. Back in 2013, the legislature decided to give 100% disabled veterans a full property tax exemption. We're not here to argue with the decision or the policy, but it was a state decision to grant this statewide, no longer a local decision. And the estimate back then was, and Judy knows this number better than I do, but somewhere around $17, $18 million. Now we're pushing $100 million every year that is taken out of local budgets. The fiscal agencies did a report last year and talked about a 14% increase each and every year in property tax exemptions just for this one exemption. So we are seeking reimbursement from the state to make local units of government whole for those losses. Great policy idea, especially when the state doesn't have to pay for it. But this is something that's coming out of local budgets, and we have services that we have to provide and budgets to maintain. We worked with the veterans organizations for years and came up with a system that they agreed to, and that we agreed to on how to get the reimbursement process through. So hoping that that gets addressed again yet this year. And lastly, personal property tax exemption. This is something that was a holdover again from last year. Back in December of 2021, the legislature passed an economic development package granting small businesses, bringing in more small businesses for the small business property tax exemption. It went from $80,000 in true cash value to $180,000 in true cash value. And we needed to figure out a reimbursement methodology for that, for the local units of government for those losses. The legislation was drafted and passed the Senate last term unanimously, but by the time it got to the House, last day of session, it did not get taken up or taken care of. So hopefully this is not too big of a lift. The legislature had set aside money for the reimbursement for local units of government. We just need the mechanism put in place. And with that, this is our advocacy team, so you will see us. Like I said, I handle the finance issues. I handle the agriculture, tourism, natural resources, and then some water drain issues. Madeline Feta in our office handles our transportation and infrastructure, general government, environmental and regulatory affairs, and then Samantha Gibson, who I think is still in the back of the room, handles the judiciary and public safety and the health and human services issues for us. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Bosworth, for your expedient presentation, allowing time for questions here. So I would open the floor for any questions. First, Rep. Breen.
Thank you. It's not so much a comment as it is a question, as so much as a comment. You mentioned trial court funding and juvenile justice. The good news is that that is an absolute priority for the Judiciary Committee, the Attorney General, and so this is something that is going to be worked on. I encourage you to contact my office to see where we're at or be involved otherwise. So this is absolutely a priority. Courts cannot depend on fines in order to function. That's not how the system is supposed to work. And our kids are our kids. We need to get them the help. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. It looks like there's a lot of good people behind these two movements, and I find it great that the counties are coming out to say we are behind this too. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well said, Rep. Breen. Thank you very much. Rep. Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina, for presenting. And as a former county commissioner and former MAC board member, I'm thrilled to have you here. And I am thrilled with this committee. We do have so many people from past local government. I say once a county commissioner, always a county commissioner. So thanks so much. You touched on a lot of things. I've served on, workforce development boards, brownfield boards, community corrections, animal services, parks. There's so many things that you didn't have time for, but counties touch so many things just as cities and villages and townships do as well. I definitely am glad that you uplifted revamping the PPT exemption. It was a very difficult vote for me, and the only reason, frankly, that I voted for that bill was for at least the 1 year, and that 1 year is up. So, Chairman, I am happy to roll up my sleeves and get to work on this issue because we've really got to figure out a solvent fix. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rep. Rogers. Rep. Hill.
Thank you. I come from municipal government and have appreciated this overview on county government and roles and responsibilities. It was very helpful. And so I do, just to help me understand the growth of the veterans exemption, because 14% is, could you just explain what's causing that number to grow? Is it more people? Is it the property values are going up? Like what is causing, just so I can better understand as we design a solution, what is the problem that we're actually trying to fix?
Absolutely, absolutely. So my numbers came from a fiscal agency report, so you can go back and look at that. But what it boils down to is they're reporting about a 9% increase in the number of people getting the 100% exemption status. Or I'm sorry, getting the 100% disabled status. So you're having more people, apply, be granted that. And so now there's more. But then the increase in the exemptions is bigger, and that doesn't seem to make sense unless you think about it this way. I know a large portion of my house payment is made up of my property taxes. And so if I can, get out of that hundreds of dollars a month, I can upgrade a home. And so I think that that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a few more upgrades and more value of the property becoming exempt from paying property taxes as, the benefit continues to grow with more people.
Thank you very much. Seeing no more questions, Ms. Bosworth, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
presentation today, and look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Thank you very much. You can touch it. I know I'm going to mess it up.
With that, we'll move to our second presentation of the day. We have Judy Allen from the Michigan Townships Association here to provide a presentation. Thank you very much for joining us here today, Ms. Allen. And when you are set, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come and present to you today, explain a little bit more about township government. As the chair indicated, I'm Judy Allen, Director of Government Relations for Michigan Townships Association. And we just want to share some information because some of you have several townships. One may have up to 54. And others of you do not have a township in your district. So I want to share with you what we can, and if there's questions that we can provide, either here or afterwards, I'm happy to provide that for you. So now I'm going to be the technologically challenged one. Oh. Can I do it with the arrows? Yeah. Thank you. There you go. Oh, thank you. I'm used to using the arrows on my keyboard. So there are 1,240 townships in the state of Michigan. And with that, the first ones were established back in 1827. Actually, that was before the state established statehood. So 10 years earlier, we had townships that were established in the state of Michigan. And as I said, we have 1,240. They vary in size. We have townships that are over 100,000 population. We have townships that are triple digit in population. So they vary in size, both population, geographic, and the populations that they serve and the services they provide are very diverse. So there's not really, one township that you can say, here's an example for all the townships in the state. And another point just wanted to share, we are home to over 52% of the state's population, and we represent over 96% of the land mass. And I want to use the next map to share with you. I have one in my office on the wall so I can identify all our townships. It's like about 3 by 4 feet. So this gives you a very much more condensed version. But everything in green is in a township. So it puts it a little bit in perspective. Our association, again, we were formed in 1953, so several years after the first township existed. We've been in existence now, we're hitting 70 years this year, so that sounds very old to me. But we exist to provide a unified voice for township government in the state. And obviously, as our mission statement indicates, we want to foster township leadership, and we do that through many of our services we provide members, and make sure that they do good public policy for a strong and vibrant Michigan. We are governed by a board of directors. We have 25 regions in the state, so we have a full board of 25 members, and each one is elected from their region. They then work with staff, and we're all committed to helping the 6,500 township officials in the state govern their communities. As Dina said, the tools and resources that they provide, we do several of the same things because we want to make sure they have the latest and greatest. We want to make sure that they're aware and are kept up to date on trends, legislation, anything that might be moving through. In terms of our governance, our board has comprised 6 committees. These are our 6 committees that we use for our policy development that gives us, as I like to say, our walking papers for government relations to come down and speak before the committee and work with the legislature. Obviously, you can see all 6 of them, and they cover a variety of different areas. We are currently in the process, this is member-driven, I should state, because we take input from our members around the state as to what they would like to see. Obviously, there are changes, things with the economy, things happen with state legislation, and that sometimes derives some of the changes that we have. But we do this, we go through a process where our members submit, we review, the committees review, it goes to our board, the board approves it. We're just in that stage right now as we head into our annual conference in April, and then our policy platform has to be member approved. It is not just board approved. Our members have to approve it. Also wanted to just share that if you weren't familiar with the township board, these are the positions that exist on the township board. And you will note a township board could have 5 members of the board, or they could have 7 members of the board. Depending on how that township is set up, they will either have 2 trustees or they will have 4 trustees. And just as Dina said about limited authority, we have 3 sources for the authority for which townships may govern. The first is it has to be, there are provisions outlined in the Constitution. The second is through state statutes, and then obviously case law, and those are the mechanisms with which we govern. If it is not provided under those 3, we cannot do it. We are mandated to provide certain services. We are mandated by law to do elections and to do tax collection, to do assessing, and for governance. But you will note there's a lot of permissive functions, that we provide for our communities, and just a few of these and pictures of them here, as well as ordinances, whether it's a police power or general law ordinance that we do, zoning ordinances. And then we also have common township boards and commissions. These are pretty much you'll find throughout all the townships in the state. We also, as a public body, we are required to comply with FOIA, Open Meetings Act. Our members are required to serve in the best interest of the public. They have to have a balanced budget. So just to put that in perspective as well. So with that, we also do a lot of partnerships with collaboration with other local units of government. Sometimes it could be a neighboring township, or it could be a city, could even be with a county. We look at that partnership to say, how can we best meet the needs of our community and that of the region, whether it's for infrastructure, whether it's for economic development, or whether it is for the delivery of services for our members and their communities. And these are other ones where we may have that partnership and may have that collaboration, or they may do it on their own. And I think the first one's probably the best example to use is the police fire department. Many have their own public safety departments, but others have found it much more, as with other types of municipalities, to maybe contract for law enforcement through their county sheriff's department, or they may have a regional fire authority. And then obviously, I know Dina referenced this. I'm sure when Michigan Municipal League was here last week, they did as well. But we also are in that same position where our 2 main funding sources are the property taxes and the constitutional revenue sharing. And as you just heard, when we hit the Great Recession, we did see that decline in the property taxes as well as the revenue sharing that locals receive and rely on to provide those services. One point I want to stress is that with statutory revenue sharing, prior to the recession, every township, city, and village received what we refer to as statutory revenue sharing. Once that recession hit, and local governments did take over a 33% cut in budgets and state funding during that time, there was that decrease caused us to be limited to 34 townships out of 1,240. We have seen some growth and increase with the legislature in the most recent years, increasing that funding and bringing more of those townships back in. But we are still limited at 12% of our members. Only 12% receive that statutory revenue sharing. So again, that will go into some of our priorities, which I'm just quickly jumping to here. But when you look at that investment to create and maintain your vibrant communities, one of those is to make sure that there is that funding there needed to provide the services for their community that the community asks for. You've heard before, prior to my presentation, but I will say it again, the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund is something that all 3 local government organizations feel very strongly about, because right now it has been discretionary funding. I will date myself, but I was here when there was actually a formula put in place. That formula was maybe funded 1 year. And then everything since that time has been discretionary. So it's not like you want to say, well, here's what's left at the table, whether or not on the table for funding, and that's what we will put into the revenue sharing. But sometimes that's how it has felt. And we want to make sure we can protect that and allow those communities to have the funds necessary, because when it is a decrease or when there's that downturn, it's public safety or public safety equipment that usually is that first hit that we have to make those cuts in. Also, when we're talking about that investment, I will also reference, I will try and not reiterate everything that Dina said, but when you talk about that reimbursement for the disabled veterans property tax exemption, there is at no time where we ever have said that that is not, the veterans aren't entitled to that. What we have said repeatedly is if the state wishes to make policy, the state needs to pay for that policy versus passing it on to another entity to pay for that. And that is exactly what has happened. And we have seen that grow, that cost. But it's actually not across the board. So when you look at your districts, you may have some communities that have a huge loss because of it, and others may have very little. So that is something that, as Dina said, we've worked with the veterans organizations. I know one gentleman is here today, talked to me again before my presentation to say we're with you on this, and we really do need to get this fixed. The other one is the personal property tax exemption. That increase caused, again, it was a policy change, commitment by everyone involved that we would make local units whole. Takes effect this year. We just need to get those 3 bills across the finish line. They were bipartisan support. There was not any opposition, so we really would like to see those go through as well. Preserving local priorities and values. This is, just as I look at each one of you up here and the committee today, no 2 of your districts are alike. And I would fathom a bet that there's not any 2 communities in your district that are exactly alike. So that is where we are very concerned about preserving that local authority and protecting those local values and priorities, because a one-size-fits-all from the state does not work. Just as if you were to cut it and put it across your districts, it's not going to work. So that is obviously an area that we have great interest and concern in. When we talk about revising and modernizing local governance, that is an area that you also have heard from other local government organizations. That is the FOIA, that is OMA, even elections areas. We want to work to make sure that the tools and resources are there for our clerks to run those elections, and there's a lot of changes that will be coming down the road. We want to make sure, because honestly, I have to say that when we look at the number of our township officials, clerks are usually the number 1 that are resigning right now because of the workload and the conditions. And we don't want to see that happen. We need them there with their expertise to continue to implement the election process. Broadband accessibility, obviously that is a large concern. We have seen economic development stalled in certain communities. I hear over and over, I had one of our board members actually said that their broadband access was so bad in Southwest Michigan that during the remote, public meetings, they literally came into their offices because they could not get access in their homes. So they went in their offices, participated remotely via Zoom, but they were all in the same building. And because they just couldn't have that access in their own areas. So very large concern, obviously, for economic purposes, and making our communities strong and vibrant. Townships, again, our members balance a very diverse set of issues and needs, and I have testified before families committees. I have testified before the education committees, never thinking that that would touch township governance, and it has. So with that, I just want to say that we look forward to working with you as we work to continue to protect local democracy in the state at the township level. And we want to protect the very unique needs and the values these communities have. Our government relations team, I think my slides might be out of order here. Oh, there it is. We have 3 full-time lobbyists. We do have one person who just recently left, so we have 2 now, but we will be back up to 3. And then it's myself, Mike Batterby is here. Mike, you can wave. And then Michelle, who is our government relations coordinator, if you're contacting our office or she's contacting you, that's who it's going to be. So with that, I said thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding townships, and I look forward to working with you in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Ms. Allen. I'm just looking around first to see if there's any questions from the committee before I enter with my own. All right, Rep. Shannon, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Really appreciate that. Just a sort of a question out of curiosity more than anything. What advantages are there to continuing to stay as a township as opposed to moving to a city? For example, the Sterling Township, which is now Sterling Heights, went from becoming a township a little over 50 years ago to becoming a city. What advantages are there to remaining a township? And are there any townships right now that are going through the paperwork to move towards becoming a city?
We have that, thank you for the question. We have that occur where there may be discussion in a community like we are a large community, because actually when you look at those townships that are very large, like 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, over 100,000, that is a question. And, you know, I asked the supervisor of our largest township in the state, I said, you're over 100,000. You know, why has the township stayed as a township? And he said, we like the uniqueness, we like the autonomy that we have. They also said that that's the preference of their residents. The second largest township in my time with Michigan Townships Association also considered it. And there, you know, the question was, okay, we would then have a higher ability to tax our residents. You know, we have more taxing authority if you become a city. The residents stood up and said, we like the form of government that we have. We like the township government form, and that's how they choose to say. So other than having the ability to do higher taxing authority, and that's generally not what our members are going after.
That is actually a question that I had with regards to modernizing. You know, we talk about it in the Open Meetings Act, but we also think about it from an infrastructure standpoint. And so I'm curious to know, we talk about broadband, if there is anything else that, as we enter into, yes, modernizing electronically and broadband infrastructure, if there's anything else that members or townships are looking at as seeing as a need to remain competitive as a place to live for people of all vocations and socioeconomic backgrounds, but to ensure that we are still continuing to attract residents to, I mean, you say 96% of our land mass is townships, then, you know, that's 96% of our area that we need to remain attentive to again, attract people to live here in the state. So any thoughts or any additional comment you might like to provide in that regard?
There's always, thank you for that question, there's always infrastructure needs, whether it is, you know, through bridges or roads, which we do not have direct authority on, but our members contribute greatly to the condition or, you know, the upgrade of those roads. And some have millages, separate millages, some use it out of their general fund. So even though we are not a recipient of PA 51 funds, we do contribute greatly to the maintenance of the roads in our communities. There's also lead line replacement for those communities that have that. When you look at, you know, drinking water, wastewater areas, those are areas for infrastructure that are desperately needed. And, you know, I did note the governor did make some increased proposed amounts in her budget proposal just right before this committee meeting. So those are areas that are very much appreciated from our members. There are areas where we have communities that would like to create a special assessment district for broadband. They have a situation where they don't want to own the equipment, they don't want to operate, they don't want to be a broadband provider, but they can't get anyone to come in and provide that service. Now, I will say there has been a little bit of more interest since the ARPA funds came through, but unless you were willing to sign up everyone in your township, you couldn't. Or in some of the areas, I'll use Washtenaw County, for example. Several communities had the access that was needed. There were pockets of some townships that did not have that access. They came to us and said, we'd like to create a special assessment district so we can pay for that infrastructure. You know, the residents asked the township to do this. We want to create this district. We want to pay for the infrastructure so we can get the service. Otherwise, they were losing home sales at anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. And unfortunately, the law does not give us the authority to create a special assessment district for broadband. Or another one, again, would be where they want to replace the lines between the homeowner's home and where that public connection is. And they're people who live on very fixed incomes. They don't have the ability to come up with those funds. They're like, can't you just do a special assessment like you do for our water, you do for our sewer? And because it's on private property, their hands are tied. So that is another, I know there's a bill that's going to be introduced shortly to look at that issue again. So those are some of the infrastructure. I could talk to you for an hour on infrastructure needs.
I know you could. We do have another question, though, and I'd like to recognize Rep. Preston.
Thank you. Director Allen, thank you for everything that you guys do. Our townships have used you quite a bit. Does MTA have a position on the Open Meetings Act, similar to Max?
We follow it. We adhere to it. In terms of any changes to it, yes, I will tell you we are very supportive of having multiple changes to it. As Dina referenced, there were 2 bills that were introduced at the end of last session that the timing just wasn't right. And, you know, talking to the former sponsor of those bills today, you know, I reiterated the fact that, you know, while we told her we were excited to see the bills introduced, we had a number of concerns with them as they were introduced. And she readily, you know, agreed that, and so we gave her feedback. We just ran out of time in the legislative session. So we do think there should be situations where individuals can participate remotely. And to use Dina's words, the guardrails that are needed. We are open to that conversation. We would not be supportive of having, as one person said it, we wouldn't want to be supportive of having a panel or a head table of all talking cell phones.
That's refreshing to hear. Another question: do you have a strategy or a plan of action? You know, I've gotten a lot of feedback from my township clerks. A lot of them think they might be retiring. You know, due to the passage of Prop 2, there's a lot of headwinds that they face in implementation, and there's a lot of anxiety. Do you guys have a plan of action or strategy?
Yes.
Just to put their minds at ease?
Yes, and we are, one of the things we will be advocating for throughout the whole legislature is making sure that there's sufficient funding there for the implementation of Proposal 2. When you look at our members, you could have townships where they are full-time, full-staffed, or full-time and have some part-time staff. We also have ones, and many in your district, where the township office is maybe only open on election day, border review, tax collection, and when they have meetings. These individuals, this is not their full-time job. They're doing that community service for their residents outside of their full-time employment. And for them to say, you're now giving me all these extra things and we're going to have to be open 9 days with 3 people at a minimum for each site for 8 hours a day, you know, that adds up and there's a cost. So yes, we will be very much doing that. We are also, I kind of, in essence of time, kind of went rather quickly over this, but we provide a lot of education to our members. That's one of the big things we do, the benefits we provide. When we have new officials come in, we do new official training. We did 2 of those, even though it wasn't a turnover cycle, a 4-year cycle this past election. We did 2 of those across the state for new members to come in. And actually, when I was speaking afterwards, a member came up to me and I'm like, you're not a newbie. You know, and she's like, no, I learn something every time. So just like when you came in as a new legislator, there were people here, whether it was Service Bureau, Fiscal Agency, Business Office, who helped and gave you kind of the resources to direct you and get you settled. We do that with our members, and we do it on an ongoing basis. We don't do it just as a new official. We do our annual education conference, which is coming up in April. We have our capital conference, which brings them here. So hopefully you all will come see your township officials at that day. We do professional development retreats for each office. So if I'm doing a professional development retreat, there's one for the supervisors, there's one for the clerks. And we also work very closely with other organizations, meaning Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks, Michigan Municipal Treasurers Association, Michigan Government Finance Officers. So we partner a lot together. And one thing I did not say earlier was we also work with the local government organizations. You've heard now from all three of us, and I think you've probably heard the same thing on some of our priorities. So we do collaborate even as statewide associations. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
A long way around it.
Yes, thank you very much, Director Allen. With that, I'm going to conclude our presentations for today. So thank you very much for your time. Well, we'll look forward to continued conversation as well and from hearing from you again. With that, that concludes presentations for today. We have no further business, but we do need a motion to excuse Reps Bazat and Pies from today's meeting. Rep Hill moves to excuse Reps Bazat and Pies from today's meeting. And again, there being no further business, the committee will stand adjourned.